joining me are Ed and Andrew from 7400 Circuits and Free Play Tech and a host of other things. Gents, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
All right.
Like you should say something like, hit the subscribe button.
Yeah, right, yeah. A bunch of like, doo-doo-doo-doo. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have that,
I don't know.
the video mentality or personality, I guess, for it. So
I just watch my kids like watch YouTube all the time. Subscribe, hit the notification button.
right. I wouldn't know where it's at even. So, so today, just going to have a ongoing conversation about one of the tenants in the incubator. Ascent Innovation is a startup incubator. So we lease space to technology startup companies. And the guys from 7400 have been with us for a little while now and plan to continue with us into the new building. So let's start with the business side. Ed and Andrew, back and forth, however you want to do it. Just tell us a little bit about 7400 and Free Play.
Okay, well, they're at the moment still the same company, but we kind of differentiate them as 7400 Circuits would be kind of like our contract engineering wing. Wing being it's basically just us two and some interns sometimes, so it's not like different people in different roles, but we're all doing all the things all the time. Anyway, 7400 Circuits kind of contract engineering. Free Play Tech is more of what we'd think of as our products that we sell, mostly straight to consumer. Some cases we have a distributor, and that's mostly for handheld video game niche stuff.
Yeah, just the retro game market is really our space that we tend to play in.
Awesome. Well, let's get a little bit more into the technology in a minute. Let's talk a little bit about you guys. Andrew, how'd you come to be in the Black Hills, or what's a little bit of your background and how you came to be a part of 7400?
Well, I grew up, was born and raised here in Rapid City. Went to school of mines to follow the family tradition. So it was, I'm the youngest of four, and my dad and all my other siblings went to school of mines and decided to go down the electrical engineering path. And out of college, I found a job here, which is slim pickings for double E degree. And that was a government-funded research project, and the fund's right up there. And at that time, Ed had, don't need to ruin his story, but he had moved back and asked me to pursue kind of doing something on our own.
Yeah.
So
Ed, how does your story match up with that then?
So I was kind of all over growing up, not here at all until I went to college here. I decided to come here for college and met a girl, got married, took her back to Minnesota where...
Song, I think.
Well, Minnesota, met a girl, married her, took her to Minnesota. Anyway, we lived there for a number of years. The girl happened to be Andrew's sister. And yeah, lived there for a number of years, decided we wanted to come back here. And I had the opportunity to do some remote development work. My background is computer science. And so came back here, but kind of, even before we moved back here for a number of years, been kind of watching jobs in the Rapid City area. And when we got here, kind of decided, well, if I'm going to have a job locally, I better create it. I could do stuff online remotely, but I thought it was more interesting to go down the road of creating a company. So did that, and I guess that's where we are now.
Yeah, so you're part of a group of startups in the area that essentially liked the quality of life, liked a lot of things about the area, and couldn't find the job, so created your own essentially.
Yep.
So that was kind of
right.
the model to do. So.
And I didn't really want to work anymore, so decided that I made my own job. I could just tell myself I don't have to do it.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Great. And then mentioned that you guys are now brothers-in-law. So a lot of intertwining and things like that. Recently had newborns, a few weeks apart, right? I guess.
Almost exactly 3 weeks.
Yep, they are now. So that was last year of October. So his kid is about 14, 15 months.
Yeah. I suppose I should know, huh? Whatever your kid is, plus 3.
Yeah.
Sure.
Actually, yeah, 14 months. There we go.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's sometimes that dynamic of, separating family and business is not to say we get too into the weeds, but it's, things come up at having dinners and whatnot. Like, oh, yeah, this thing. So as far as saying, oh, I wanted to create my own job and, not work when I don't want to work, but sometimes I guess that's kind of maybe the false idea of being your own boss is being able to separate the two of life and business.
Sure. Yeah, that's tough for any founder probably, but even more so to have a business meeting while having family dinner, I suppose, huh?
Yeah, that stuff comes up a lot. We usually don't really sit down and hash things out that way, but a lot of times it's like, oh, I got an email just now. Let's talk about this. Or that. I would say that the biggest problem is when there's, other family events. Like recently we went to a wedding, and it's not like, hey, Andrew, I got to be gone for a week to go to this wedding. It's like, hey, we got to shut our doors for a week because the whole family's going to this wedding.
Yeah, that makes sense. That does make a unique challenge, I guess, and an opportunity in some cases, I suppose.
Oh, we got a question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I appreciate that, Ed. And I should remind everybody as well. Feel free to ask a question at any time here. This is an interactive discussion. So, from I think Rachel with our own office of Elevate. So, how do you find that balance of being able to enjoy life and not always have it turn into business? How do you pause those conversations? Or do you even try to pause them?
Conversations, I would say we don't get too deep outside of the office. A lot of times it'll be like that, oh, this is the thing I sent you, let's talk about it later kind of thing. For me, I would say one of the big things that I do intentionally is on the weekends, mostly I try to not look at my email at all, which then means on Monday it's almost all emails or so we kind of pride ourselves. We're selling direct to consumer in a lot of cases, so we get a lot of direct interaction with the people too, tech support kind of things, and we kind of pride ourselves in being really diligent and open with our customers. And then a lot of times if they they're a lot of times working on our stuff on the weekend, because that's their time to do hobby things. And a lot of times then it's almost 3 days later in some cases. I'm if they emailed me on Friday night and I get back to them on Monday morning, then usually I feel like I need to apologize for not being available on the weekend.
Yeah.
But usually I try not to do that kind of stuff. Sometimes if it's a simple thing and I see it on my phone, I'll just reply to them. But
I was going to say, so Ed pretty much does most of the tech support unless it comes down to something really specific on the hardware side. Then he'll ask me to give my 2 cents. But for the most part, a lot of that stuff, unless we're really waiting on a project that's taken a while, we make a big purchase and we get some emails in, I, for the most part, don't really respond to most of those emails and whatnot. And we may get into this later, but we originally started doing a lot of that contract work and now have transitioned to more of our own products. And so I think when we were doing more contract work, there was a lot more pressure as far as people saying, hey, I want this project done, I need this. And so then you're trying to, help them and meet their deadlines more so. Whereas when it's our own product, I think we have a lot more leeway of just saying, hey, this is where we're at. This is the type of business we want to run, and we don't want to put that added stress on. So I think in some ways doing our own stuff, I mean, it creates a different type of maybe stress of making sure that it's right, because it's when you're making hardware, you're multiplying. If you have one problem, you're multiplying each time you send out a new product, whereas doing contract work, you know, there's a bit more, there's another layer of vetting that goes on and saying, hey, I did this, you know, we kind of built it to these specs, but that's kind of getting away from the question here. But I think our own products make some of that more weekend stuff easier, because it's easier to push that back because you're only responsible to yourself.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Versus, I mean, other than the questions.
Yeah, I mean, I did think while you were talking couple times, maybe more than a couple times, where, you know, we in the electronics industry, we do end up working a lot with people in China, other places in Asia, but mostly China. And I know there's been a handful of times where Andrew has been trying to work with maybe somebody that's circuit boards for us or something, and kind of been answering, you know, waking up in the middle of the night answering questions so we can get things done quicker. Otherwise, that turnaround time is, we send them a question during the day, they get back to us during the night. If that leads to another question, and it's like a round trip time of about 12 hours.
Yeah,
like.
sure.
So some of those times are like just stay up all night, and, you know, not necessarily awake all night, but waking up whenever the emails come in or whatever.
Yeah.
But the flexibility then is that, okay, well, we have to do that for a couple nights, then just not come in or not do much during the day.
Sure.
That was before you had kids.
Yeah, right. Yeah, kids change things for sure. So yeah, thanks, Shane. We do want to move into a little bit more specifically about what you guys do. So I guess it's a great way to go into that. Shane asks, do you primarily do circuit design and embedded consulting development, or do you also have your own product offering? And then can you just go a little more detail into those products?
Sure. I would say originally we were more circuit design, embedded consulting development stuff like you asked, Shane. And we kind of used that contract engineering money, let's say, to kind of bootstrap into doing our own products. Now we're mostly our own products and some consulting, I would say. Not a lot, though. Over COVID stuff, we did a little bit more of that because we didn't want to put as much time, effort, money into stuff that we weren't sure that was going to sell well.
Yeah.
So I did a lot of work with one of our contractors, or one of our people that contract with us. But now our own products, our main product is, well, there's two. We have like a premium model and kind of a base model. It's a circuit board that goes inside the shell of a Game Boy Advance, and it lets you basically, the short of it is, it lets you put a modern computing platform inside of what looks, when you're done with it, like a Game Boy Advance, like an old handheld retro gaming system. And it's really DIY at the moment, and we're kind of looking forward and making that a little bit less DIY, I guess. I don't know if you want to get that into too much about that, like future kind of stuff yet, or we want to.
Either way.
Anyway, so we're in that kind of space, and then we do make some other things because we're in that space and because we've had contacts with people and stuff. So I think one of the things we make is a battery pack for an actual Game Boy Advance. So it's not for our version of it, but some of the same technology we use just to take what used to be just AA batteries. You can modify the plastic of the shell, and then you can use this modern LiPo battery and charge it with USB-C and stuff like that. So some things like that, some things that these guys want to modify their retro games with, like make the speaker louder. So we sell a little amplifier board.
Okay.
Weird little stuff like that sometimes we look at and think, why would anybody want this? And they keep buying it. So.
And did you have something else?
Oh, I was just looking at the question again. One thing that I guess want to point out that Ed was saying, transitioning from consulting to our own stuff, So in there, as far as like kind of building up some money so that we could transition to our own stuff, was also a time in which we launched a Kickstarter. So there's kind of a big shift for us was the consulting, the Kickstarter with this premium base model circuit board, and that has kind of carried us to where we are now. And that we did our first Kickstarter a couple of years ago. So that opened up the door to a lot of other secondary products that Ed has alluded to.
Sure. And you talk a little bit more about your customer so everybody can understand. It's kind of unique gaming enthusiasts. You've got an analogy used with kind of classic cars, I guess. So
I would say that market is analogous to the classic car market, and that there's all these guys that, I mean, everybody's driven by, there's been a car show or something. Some of those guys, they want like everything to be all original. They want to restore it back to its all original. There's other guys that want like the original body, but a modern engine under the hood. Some guys like this mention of the stereo, like the audio amplifier. Some guys want to soup up the sound system and put big subwoofers in their old truck or whatever it is,
right.
you know. It's similar like that. Some guys want everything to be exactly stock. Maybe they just want to clean it up and make it, you know, as perfect as it could be. And there's other guys that want it to look like an old machine, but play, you know, like a new machine, or even do stuff that, you know, that has nothing to do with gaming at all. It's all across the board, I would say. There's definitely a market that only cares about playing old games and they don't care how they play them. And then there's other people that really care about how they play them and what it feels like, and if it or you know, that it looks, you know, if they're doing something and somebody looks over their shoulder, they're like, hey, that looks like a Game Boy Advance, but it's got extra buttons on it. Or
sure.
One of the things is there's a guy that makes a metal shell for it, and it's like, wow, like it was, how'd you get that metal shell? Or, you know, whatever it is, they want that wow factor. And there's another part of the market that just is DIY kind of guys, and they want the experience of building it, and they might not even play with it when they're done. Or
sure.
Yeah, there's the we do very little with the software side of this product that's open source operating system. And so we kind of give people the tools of presenting the hardware, and then they can go and configure the software and build the hardware how they want it, so that it's really customizable to, I mean, obviously within this form factor, but adding buttons or joysticks or whatever it is. And we even have people that, you know, might be interested in like the indie game scene. So you could use this to, if you were a developer, you could port your game over and play it on this handheld version rather than, you know, sitting at your computer.
which is, I don't know if you saw that, but Shane was kind of asking about that.
Yeah, so Shane has another question here, and I want to just clarify something right before that. So currently you have been mostly providing, I know you sell a kit that people can kind of build their own Game Boy Advance, or kind of special order if someone wants an aftermarket product, but kind of sending to someone that then is doing the assembly or kind of that, you know. But you talked a little bit about maybe the future, about where you're going. And then as you're discussing that, also Shane's got a question about, do you have to deal with many licensing issues or concerns with the older games, either now or as you go into your kind of new model here?
So in theory, if you don't know about what we specifically do and you're looking at like old video game systems or whatever, there would be kind of two main concerns that you might have. The one that, if we're talking about something that looks and feels like a Game Boy Advance, well, a Game Boy Advance would say Nintendo on it. It would say Game Boy. Those would be, you know, Nintendo's intellectual property. So we don't do anything right now with the shells would be where that intellectual property is. We just do the circuit boards. There's kind of there's actually kind of three ways to build your own right now. You either take a Game Boy Advance apart, so you already own that. It's in theory Nintendo's intellectual property, but you own the plastics and whatever. You take it apart and put our stuff in it. You can get aftermarket shells that are basically the original market for them is like if you had a Game Boy Advance and it was all beat up, you could get a new shell for it and make it look nice. Well, our stuff goes into that shell too. And then there's the third one now. There's a guy that we work with that makes a metal shell that looks very similar and feels similar to the original Game Boy Advance shell, but he makes it out of aluminum, and it looks and feels super nice, but it doesn't say Nintendo or Game Boy on it anymore. And then it's something you sound like you're gonna say.
No, I was just wondering if we probably could go and grab just to show it too.
Sure, if you like.
Yeah, the advantage of being in the incubator, Andrew will run and we'll have some show and tell here. So
that would be the physical side. The other question then would be a lot of people have about the software, like you might play. Most people know like Super Mario Brothers or something like that. Well, we don't sell any software.
Okay.
There is an open source platform that Andrew mentioned, and we host a version of it that has like basically some things pre-configured for our system, but you can just download. They call it. Most people would run on because ours is built around Raspberry Pi. Would run Raspbian, which is the Raspberry Pi OS, and then you could take the same things that we do and just do the modifications yourself, but we just kind of package it up and make it easy. That doesn't come with any like games or anything like that, any copyrighted games or anything. There are a couple that we pre-install that we worked with that, like Andrew kind of mentioned, like you can make your own game for it. There's a company, I don't know if they're even a registered company, but it's kind of a loose group of guys that make games that are like independent game developers that really don't make any money off of it. They just do it as a hobby. We pre-install a few of those games.
Okay.
And yeah, so you can download games like that for it. You can download like open source games. There's emulators. You can download free games that would, like, even for like the Nintendo Entertainment System, say that emulator will run on our machine. You can get freeware games for that are totally public domain. And then it's up to you also, like if you own a physical cartridge of something and you have the ability to dump it to a ROM file or decide to, it's up to the end user, I guess, is what
Sure.
I'm saying, what games they want to install on there ultimately. So we don't pre-install that. We don't sell any of that stuff.
Got it. Sure. And so then it really, I guess if they were going to resell your product, the licensing with games is their problem, I guess, then kind of. So if they are going to.
Yeah, and there are a few people that do resell our thing, and most of the value that they add is building it for people.
Sure.
Already. So ours does take a fair bit of effort, and that's part of the market is that people like to build and customize these things. And so, they want to pick all the different colors or however they want to modify it themselves. And so a lot of people want to do that. And there's a smaller segment of that market that just wants a working thing and they don't want to build it themselves. They
Sure.
just think it looks cool or whatever. And there are people that will buy our kit and then buy the shells and then build it all, maybe add different joysticks or something. I think Andrew's bringing some that have like different versions of different things people built.
Sure.
And then, yeah, it would be up to those guys, I guess, if they wanted to pre-install anything different on them. But as far as I know, those guys just kind of do the same thing we do and say, when you get it, just put this file on the SD card and that's got the operating system. And then you can go find guides how to install different games or different emulators or different things like that.
Sure, absolutely. So just shows the flexibility we have here at Elevate Rapid City and in the incubator that mid-show we were able to change formats here. So Andrew, show us a little bit of what you got here that Ed was just describing.
Oh, sure, yeah. So here is an original Game Boy, unmodified, just standard AV buttons. This is all original. And then here would be a modified free play with, you can see there's a couple extra buttons up here. There's USB port, charging, SD card, HDMI port, whereas the original Game Boy just has a link port. Here's some examples of some other shells. This is a guy, this is a unit that one of our customers built that's kind of a real enthusiast and tinker.
This guy has a YouTube channel that he'll does builds and stuff like that.
Okay.
You can see, dual analog, in one sense, it doesn't even look remotely like a Game Boy after he was done. And secondary buttons. He even made it thinner, so he even cut the shell down to where it's not as thick. And then here's a metal shell that has dual analog, 4 buttons.
This shell is machined out of aluminum.
Okay.
So you can see the speakers moved. I mean, there's just so many combinations here of what you can do with this unit. And I guess one last thing is just to give you an idea of what the internal circuit board looks like. Here is our board, and this is our premium board, and it comes with compute module 3 in it.
That's a Raspberry Pi compute module 3.
So this here is, we buy this. This is an off-the-shelf little Linux computer. And people use this in all sorts of various projects. And so what we do is supply proper voltages and break out all the I/O and ports so that you can put it in this form factor, I guess.
So I think I've seen your stuff before. I think the HDMI part is funny to me because you put a lot of effort into this device to then hook up a cable to put it on your big screen or something. Is that the idea, or what are
it is there? Like I said before, there's a lot of things that are funny about it that you don't like. Why would somebody want to do this? And then but the nice thing about that is the way that it's set up is the HDMI part of it is just plug and play. So you can be playing it like this, and I don't know, use case might be you're sitting on the bus, riding home, and you're playing it. And then when you get home, you plug in the HDMI, kind of like a docking station in a way.
yeah.
And then you have it on the TV, and you could plug in a USB cable and play 2-player or something like that.
Oh wow, interesting.
But here's kind of a more abstract. I mean, I wouldn't really say this is the use case of free play, but this is what it could be used for. This is just the Linux machine, so you could take free Linux, like Red Hat or something, or I believe you probably put Red Hat on it.
Yeah, I mean, most people do that. It's called Raspbian.
Raspbian, but sure, whatever. We could put an operating system on this, connect your HDMI and a keyboard, and you could actually be running. I mean, you could be typing and surfing the internet and whatnot. I mean, it would not be ideal setup. Or you could, like out front, you have your little poster board, a digital dashboard, and this could do everything that does.
Sure.
We could connect your TV, and we could have this pulling from whatever website you want, displaying. So it's kind of versatile in that sense. And one thing that's really nice about the HDMI as far as the DIY perspective is it's good for if you want to set stuff up.
Programming or
debugging. Because, I mean, there's a lot of things to go. There's just a learning curve.
As far as the DIY part of it, if you mess something up and the LCD isn't working, you can always plug in the HDMI and see, oh, is the operating system running?
Sure.
And the LCD is just not functioning, or so it gives you kind of that
makes sense.
external fallback plan too.
So I didn't know what Raspberry Pi was when I first met you guys.
Yep.
I barely know now, I guess, but can you explain a little bit of that more in layman's terms? And then, also, you talk about some of these features, like, you can put a little Wi-Fi card in these, right? And you can, so you could be playing theoretically like a Fortnite or, any of those things, right? Maybe not Fortnite, but,
Well, so the guy that made this one has a video, and it shows him running, I think it's like Grand Theft Auto, I don't remember which version, but there is something called Steam Link.
I was going to say Grand Theft Auto on his computer.
So it's not actually running the game on his machine.
Okay.
It's just using this machine to do the video and the buttons.
Okay. So it's broadcasting it to this, and then he's using the inputs.
Yeah, and I guess this is one of these things that once you're doing a thing, you learn about different markets and different segments. Right. We did a survey because we're looking towards what we're going to do next. And one of the things on the survey was that people wanted to do more of that kind of stuff. So there's the most popular one right now is called Steam Link. So Steam is a place where you can go and get all kinds of games, mostly on PC and Mac. So like you have your computer running over there. The idea would be that you run your Steam games on the computer, and it might be this big beefy machine that's sitting in a closet somewhere or something, and you could be sitting on your couch and playing it there. And you can do some of that like on a phone or something like that now, but your phone doesn't have these like tactile joysticks on them, and, the buttons and everything. So there is a segment of people that want to do that, and that's one of the things that we're kind of looking toward, whether or not we want to support that kind of stuff more, not in the way of, we wouldn't want to support it in the way of like, how can we make it better for people to do that easier, or, the form factor of that kind of stuff. But there's just all kinds of stuff that like, once you're in a market, you find out, oh, people want to do this thing, or people start taking the thing that you made and modifying it to do this other thing, and like analog sticks. Well, the first, like, kind of a progression here, Andrew pointed out, like when we first started doing this, we just had A and B buttons. We thought, well, who needs more buttons? This is kind of this Game Boy Advance shell. You get what you get kind of thing. And people said, well, we want to play games that need 4 buttons. So then we said, well, here's an easy way to add 2 more buttons. And so we
see that,
but anyway, this one has 4 buttons, but then these 2 are kind of added in a little bit of a hokey way, I would say. But it was like they're, at the time it was like, well, how do we add 2 buttons to this thing that already exists? And then the progression was, well, now we have 4 buttons and they all feel the same, versus this other hokey way. They kind of felt weird. And then people wanted more buttons up here, and then people want analog, so it's hard to see black on black, but there's 2 analog sticks down here. And yeah, you kind of think, well, why would anybody want analog sticks if they're, if they want it to be like a Game Boy Advance? So part of the market is you want it to kind of look like a Game Boy Advance, but when you're playing it, you still want to have the options of doing those things. Or there's a big chunk of the market, I think, that wants somebody to look over their shoulder and go, hey, why do you have analog sticks on your Game Boy Advance?
Sure.
It's kind of a conversation piece.
Yeah, very cool. So I derailed us there, but so what is Raspberry Pi? Just for the average guy. So
Raspberry Pi, actually, I think I was going to say now, but I think it was actually probably a couple of years ago, maybe, is like the most widely sold computer ever.
Okay.
I was going to say, maybe go down the path of originally where it started, like in the UK as a...
Yeah, it's kind of meant to be like an educational system. The Raspberry Pi Foundation is who makes it, and it's a nonprofit organization, actually. And it was, if I remember right, it was kind of some guys from Broadcom who kind of well known in that industry, doing a lot of chips and stuff like that. They wanted a platform for their chips, so they started the Raspberry Pi Foundation and kind of made this like cheap, easy computing platform for the masses in a way. So their main kind of price point is about $25 for us. So the one that we use is not their full Raspberry Pi platform. The full one will usually have its own HDMI and USB, and the originals like didn't have Wi-Fi on them, but nowadays they have like Ethernet and Wi-Fi and all that stuff built into the main circuit board. And then at some point they started making one. I think we have one over here. Our base model one is centered around a Raspberry Pi Zero. And the Zero originally was $5. Now there's a $10 version of it that has Wi-Fi on it, and it's kind of a tiny, less powerful version. And the interesting thing about that one is it's $5, $10 price point. We as a company can't even buy them in more quantity than anybody else. Anywhere you go that I know of will only let you buy one at a time. Even the brick and mortar, like a micro center has stores like in some of the big cities. And even if you go into a micro center, as far as I know, still, I haven't been to a micro center for a while. But if you wanted a Raspberry Pi Zero, you could go in there and you could buy one, but you couldn't buy two. You could leave the store and go back in and buy another one, but you can't buy them in any quantities. So we, like our base model version, we don't sell with the Raspberry Pi because of that. And it's this weird business model that's like, as dirt cheap as they can get this, like basically $5 computer that, they want it to be like an entry, like a gateway into this kind of DIY sort of educational platform. And because it's so cheap, and now there's just tons of them around. There's like tons of people being like kind of in this like engineering community, especially like on school minds. There's a lot of people that have a Raspberry Pi that have never done anything with it. That they bought it because it was $5, $10, $25, whatever.
So I'm going to pull in a few other things here. I don't know entirely the whole mission of the foundation of Raspberry Pi, but make a computer as small as possible, as cheap as possible. They give you just enough information on the hardware to interact with it, but pretty much it was, let's make all of the software open source. So what makes Raspberry Pi so powerful is that there are just thousands and thousands of libraries and tool sets that and support on the forums. It's kind of the go-to platform if you want something that's gonna maybe connect to the internet, have a couple digital I/O pins to turn on and off some relays or whatever. It is just just a really commodity, small, compact.
And there are, so in this kind of handheld gaming kind of space, there are a bunch of people that do similar things as far as like a handheld retro gaming platform. The DIY part of it is smaller niche, but a lot of the, say, like Chinese companies that make little handheld gaming platforms, they'll make their own platform, or they'll embed some other chip into their platform. Almost nobody else is. I mean, there's a couple people, but most people aren't doing it on Raspberry Pi. But Raspberry Pi gives us this huge install base and huge knowledge base of DIY community people.
Sure.
So there are people that do it and they don't care about the DIY aspect of it at all. And then there's people that do care about that and want to be able to like graft on their own little like analog sticks or whatever. And because there's so many people with a Raspberry Pi, there's so much information and there's so much know-how versus the other stuff. It would be like, if you got it, maybe you could do it, but it's like there's 10 other guys in the world that wanted to do the thing that you wanted to do.
Sure.
So yeah, that's one of the powerful things about Raspberry Pi for us.
a couple questions here from our team with Rachel. It kind of leads into one I had for you. So how has COVID-19 affected your business? You talked a little bit about picking up a little more consulting work, and then how are you going to come out of it? You talked about some thoughts on what's next, but what's next?
Well, I was going to say at first, I was just going to remind me of what my wife, she was first concerned about, how our business was going to do. And she had walked into, I don't know if it was Target or something, and it seemed like kind of early on in the COVID world, the Nintendo Switches were completely, sold off the shelves. And so there's, more people are sitting at home, kind of trying to buy time.
Mm-hmm.
And we're kind of just going to talk about like our future, and where we're at now is, like I said earlier, that we had done a Kickstarter, and we're kind of at the tail end of our product being kind of the latest and greatest. So we're looking at the next revision of our premium model.
Okay.
But I would say that even though we're kind of at the tail end of our current model, because of people being at home, we still had like highs and lows. It's kind of been a bit of a roller coaster, I would say. Like we have some really good weeks and some down weeks. I would say in the past few weeks, getting closer to the Christmas time frame, sales definitely picked up a bit. So I would say it's a little bit hard just because, like I said, our product is.
Yeah, I would say numbers wise, we can look at, like this year compared to the previous year, and definitely our sales are down. But it's been a little more up and down. I mean, I think baseline is lower for sure, but it's kind of been oddly rocky.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it was kind of interesting because, when COVID really hit, people were like, okay, we got to stay home, don't go into the office. We thought, I know a couple guys that are in industries that basically said when that happened, their sales went to zero immediately. Ours was a little bit more like there was kind of weird ramp up at that time.
Mm-hmm.
When people were sitting at home and they're like, they're not laid off. They're just, went home for a couple of weeks or something like that. Or when the stimulus checks came out, those kind of times that sales kind of spiked for a while.
Sure.
And then I think when that lasted longer, there's less discretionary spending.
Yeah.
And, but then again, it seems to come in weird waves where before it was like a lot of our sales, prior to COVID, a lot of our sales would happen over the weekends. So Monday time would be a lot of, like boxing and shipping. And so that's the time for us that's really noticeable when like how many things we're shipping out. And, that was fairly consistent. Most Mondays were a bunch of boxes to ship out. And during COVID, it's been like, wow, like one Monday there might not be hardly anything to ship out, and then the next Monday there'd be like 5 times more than the previous Monday, and it seems just like oddly back and forth. So
I think we just because we're kind of towards the end of the market, a lot of our sales is kind of, hey, someone posted this in this forum, or like we did this. So much of what we do is either Ed interacting with social media or chatting on forums, that it's kind of I would say a bit of an active role in marketing.
Yeah.
And so I think we see sales spikes when someone says, hey, look, I built this.
Sure.
And they share their photos and then their friends, and it's that type of. We're not going out and we're not gonna buy a billboard in Rapid City and say, hey, you need a free play.
Sure.
Shane said bye. Bye, Shane.
Thanks for coming, Shane. He probably tried to part on us. How about, what's the best advice you've been given when it comes to owning your own business and interacting with people and customers?
I don't know. Oh, good.
Oh.
Go ahead, because
I would say the big thing, and I'm not the face of free play tech. It's the customer support, but I would say from seeing other people come and go in this space, and I guess I'm talking more on the free play side than the 7400 circuit side, but is that I think a lot of people are pleased with that Ed takes the time to respond to each inquiry. And, some people have said like, oh man, I didn't expect someone to actually, like a person to respond to me.
Sure.
And so I think customer support, as much as we're so used to, maybe call centers and, they have their place. And granted, it's not like free play is commodity, but at the same time, it's not like a quick grab cash money scheme and not support our customer base. And so I think that's something that has helped us. Also gives us a little bit of motivation too of, oh, there's actually, real people on the other end.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy. Like people have sent us, like there's one email I remember in particular. There's a guy that his kid was going through a bunch of like medical problems. And so like, it's like, oh yeah, my free play is my go-to thing. I spend a lot of time at the hospital now. And,
oh, wow.
And so it's, it's like, oh, that's not really what we had in mind, but like, he just like, gave us a little bit of sentiment, like,
yeah,
helping them out.
Yeah. And I think that kind of stuff, the takeaway from that in a way is, we're not building a system that's made for dads that are sitting in the hospital with their kid. But the takeaway from that is that we have that rapport with our customers, that they feel like they can share that kind of stuff with us, or they feel like we're not there for them and like helping them through tough times necessarily, but there for them if they have concerns about building their system or whatever it is. Yeah, I've been told a ton of times that, oh, this is the best support I've had, best support I've had on a product for, I didn't really, like, I didn't expect to actually talk to somebody, or whatever. It is kind of interesting. Now I think we're a little bit used to it, but at first that was kind of shocking. It was like, well, we're just treating these people like one of my big things when we first started this is a DIY thing, but we don't want to have, like, DIY stuff is sometimes for some people, like you buy our thing and then you try to do it yourself and you screw it up, and then you feel like, oh, well, that's, whatever you paid out the door. We wanted to make a product that was DIY, but still, like, at least for me, I never wanted to have somebody that felt like they bought a thing and they couldn't use it the way that it was intended.
Right.
So, with that, I think a lot of people felt like, wow, you really went out of your way to help me fix this thing that I screwed up, or those kind of things. To kind of get back to the best advice, I don't remember where this exactly came from. I don't remember even if it was somebody specific that said this or if it was just a couple things that I pulled from somewhere. But I would say one of the biggest things kind of going into like making our own products was that, like, how do we price this? We know we can sit down and say, here's what raw materials go into it. Here's the price of those chips and circuit board and everything. But how do we price that to the consumer? And I know that I went through, I can't even think of his name. Maybe it's Dan. There was a couple of talks that one of Darren Haar's friends gave and I think I sat in on the same talk twice in different locations. And he talked about value-based pricing versus cost plus pricing.
Sure.
And I think there is definitely, especially in like this commodity handheld gaming kind of market, there is definitely a feeling of, especially with these, like I talked about these guys in China that make really cheap electronics. There's this kind of like, we're going to make this many of them and it costs us this much to make one of them. So whatever that cost is, you know, times 1.3 or something like that. And we're going to make this little margin off of one, and that's it. I wouldn't say that we necessarily use as much of a value-based pricing scheme, because it's not like that talk was specifically about what, you know, B2B kind of sales.
Sure.
So if you're selling this widget to a company and your widget costs $10 to create, but it gives them $100 in value, you shouldn't be selling it for $20.
Yeah, sure.
You should be selling it for like maybe $80. And
Yeah.
then you can go to them and say, hey, this is saving you $20.
Right, sure.
You know, that kind of sales. But I would say on that side of it, one of the things was like when we did our first Kickstarter campaign, a lot of people do a Kickstarter and then they have like here's what the cost is going to be when we actually start selling this thing after Kickstarter. Here's the Kickstarter cost. Oh, well, I guess be kind of below that. Here's what you're going to get it for as an incentive to be one of our Kickstarters. And then on top of that, they'll a lot of times have like an early bird pricing to try to entice people to jump on it right away.
Sure.
And one of the bits of advice that I got was, yeah, you don't need to do that. That kind of cheapens your thing. If you have a good thing that people want, you don't have to, like, maybe you want to have an incentive for people to come in early. So maybe you give them a little bit of, you know, $10 off or something, but you don't really need to say, hey, look, you're going to get it at cost, because it kind of cheapens your item in the minds of people. And you can always go the other way.
Right.
You know, you can always like sell it at this cost, and then, you know, 6 months later say, hey, we're going to start selling it at this cost. It's hard to go the other way.
Right.
And then the other thing was, you know, kind of back to this tech support issue. Tech support costs us a fair bit of money. Sure. As far as time goes, you know. But we also have kind of this idea that if we sell something to somebody, we know that there's inherently going to be, not for every person, but for a lot of people, that there's going to be a cost associated with, you know, export of it. Or if they break something, in a lot of cases, we have the ability to just send them out a replacement and say, here, when we send you the replacement, send us the broken one back.
Sure. Yeah.
We do a lot of the stuff ourselves. We can a lot of times repair them anyway or whatever, or just have somebody, even if they screwed it up, a lot of times we'll just say, send it to us, we'll fix it for you and send it back.
Okay.
We won't charge them for that kind of stuff. But to have that feeling of, yeah, I know it costs more than this cheap thing that you can go get off the shelf, but there's this value add to it.
Right.
You're part of our family now, you know, we're going to help you along with the process.
Sure.
So while I do, you know, a lot of people do look at our stuff and say, well, why is it so expensive compared to this other thing that I could go get that's super cheap? I think there's a lot wrapped up in it. And, you know, a lot of people understand it, and the people that don't understand it probably weren't going to buy from us in the first place.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's really profound stuff there. Pricing, I'm sure, is
it's
an ongoing battle, huh?
Yeah, I mean, going back to I don't know, looks like we're gonna be out of time here.
Oh, somebody said that you're.
Yeah, I quit touching my mic, so.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you sent it out before. It was like, you want to sell 100 of these things for, you know, a couple dollar markup, or like 10 of these things with a higher markup. And in the $100, I mean, in the 100 item sell, if you have a couple problems and your margin is such that you can't replace it, or your margins are so small that you can't make up, and you go under because you it's all based on, hey, if everything goes well and we sell it for just a hair over what we can make it, and your company goes under because you can't really allow much for support.
Right.
And so being in that DIY space, pricing it in a way that you can allow that ability to replace and fix things, and you just have overall a better customer experience. And we're still around, because we've seen a handful of other people try to do what we're doing, and they've come and gone because they were trying to cheapen their product, and we're having problems with, some of that customer support aspect.
Yeah, I think if it's not sustainable, like if you're not pricing your thing and making it sustainable, then it doesn't help any, I mean, yeah, it depends on the product. You might get the guy that's like, oh, I'll jump at that because it's super cheap, and then a year from now you're not around.
Right.
We had this kind of come up with a guy that's going to be creating some plastic parts for us, and he said, I was telling him, I think if we can get it somewhere around $5 per part, that would be good for us. He said, oh, I can get it way cheaper than that. And I said, after we talked about it for a while, I said, actually, we want to pay you $5 a part for that thing, even though you said maybe we could get it close to $2 a part, because I don't want a situation where, because he was doing a fair bit of effort to make each of them. And I don't want a situation down the road, because this $5 thing, we're going to end up bundling with something else, and it's probably almost $10 of value to us to resell to the customer. So at $5, we're still making a little bit of money off of it. It makes it sustainable for us, but I want it to be sustainable for him. I don't want him to make 150 of them and then all of a sudden say, I got interested in something else,
sure.
Or, it's not really worth my time anymore, or whatever it is. Because at that point, it's hard for him to then say, well, I need to kind of bump up my sales price to do it. He's already got that idea in his head that it's, and it's not going well.
Right.
I said, I'd rather pay you $5 a part now. And and it kind of goes for our customers too. I think before we went into this business, I would have kind of said, I'd rather sell, 1,000 things at $10 each than sell 100 things at $1,000 each or whatever. But I think I've flipped that around a bit more, and especially for kind of this niche market. I'd rather sell, if we're talking about the same amount of profit to us, I would rather sell less at a premium price.
Sure.
And there's a handful of reasons. One of them being I'd rather service the people that want to pay a premium for something than the guys that just want to get something cheap. And
absolutely. Well, we're up on our hour here, so we probably should wrap up. So thanks again so much, guys. I always want to ask for sure, how do people find 7400 and Free Play?
So anybody that wants to find 7400 circuits probably would only be Rapid City people, but there is a website, 7400 Circuits. The website is pretty poor, but it'll get to us if you there's a phone number there, or contact us kind of email thing.
Okay.
And then Free Play Tech is what we sell these things under, and that's freeplaytech.com. And the same way that one has like an actual web shop that you can go to and buy our products, or you can contact us the same way. I actually don't think that one has a phone number on it, so don't call us.
Well, you can also go to elevaterapidcity.com, click on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and then navigate to our community members, which 7400 and Free Play Tech are listed there. See a replay of this at the Elevate Rapid City YouTube page, or find it on the elevaterapidcity.com/resources and training page.
And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And
I do have to get those things now, Ed, I guess. So, guys, thanks again so much. Thanks to all that could join us today, and we'll see you next month. Have a good one.